Okay, so we're graphing a sine curve. We want A, B, C, and D. Sorry, I said cosine curve. We're graphing a cosine curve. We want A, B, C, and D. A is going to be -2, amplitude -2. B is going to be 1, frequency of 1. C is going to be pi over 4, and D is going to be -3. So we're going to have a vertical shift of -3. We want a period. Period is 2 pi over B. Period of 2 pi. Block that in. X interval is the period 2 pi over 4. That's going to be pi over 2. Pi over 2. Put a box around that. And then we want phase shift. Let's just say PS. Phase shift equals C over B. What is C? C is pi over 4 over B. B is just 1. So that's just going to be pi over 4. This graph is going to shift to the right pi over 4. Then we have a vertical shift. We're just going to say VS. What's our vertical shift? Vertical shift is y equals -3. So y equals -3. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and graph immediately our vertical shift. Okay? So let's graph that. Okay? So y is -3 is going to move the graph down. So let's put the axis towards the top, the x-axis towards the top. Okay? All right. So we're putting the x-axis up there. Make sure I'm still on the camera there. We have a y, we have an x, and we're going to graph -1, -2, y is -3. Right? So I'm going to take and graph a midline. We've moved our midline down to y equals -3. Y equals -3. Just to remind ourselves, the entire cosine graph, a negative cosine, is going to be graphed right around that midline. Okay, now the next step, if we remember, is amplitude. What is our amplitude? Amplitude is the absolute value of A, which is the absolute value of -2, which is 2. All right, now we're ready to do the table. So we're doing our table X, Y. We know that we're going to shift. We have a C. So what are we going to do? We're going to set bx minus c, which is x minus pi over 4 equal to 0, and we're going to set x minus pi over 4 equal to 2 pi. That's what we're going to do. Now, so we're just going to solve for x to get our x1 and our x5. So we're just going to add pi over 4, add pi over 4. We're going to get x equals pi over 4. This is our x1. We're going to put it right up here, pi over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to solve for our x5. We're going to add pi over 4, add pi over 4. These cancel, we get x equals, now we have 2 pi plus pi over 4. What do we need to do? We need to get a common denominator. So we have 4 over here, we're going to get 4 over here. 1 times 4. Now if we multiply the denominator by 4, we have to multiply the numerator by 4. What is 2 pi times 4? Well, that would be 8 pi. See what we've done? We multiplied the denominator by 4 and the numerator by 4. Now we're going to add, we have common denominators, we're going to add the numerator. We're going to get 9 pi over 4. And this is our x5 value. So now we've got the 9 pi over 4 is our fifth value. We need 5 values in the x terms, and now we know that we have a period of 2 pi, so and that is exactly what we have, 2 pi between x1 and x5. We've got to find all of our middle values. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to add to x1, which is pi over 4, we're going to add our interval value. Our interval was pi over 2. So we're going to take pi over 4 and add pi over 2. What are we going to do? We're going to get common denominators. 2 times 2 is 4. Pi times 2 is 2 pi. So just adding the interval, the interval of pi over 2. 1 pi plus 2 pi is 3 pi over 4. This is the x2 value. Now we're going to put the x2 value up here. 3 pi over 4. Okay, now what are we going to do now? We're going to add another interval, pi over 2, to our x2 value. We're going to get a common denominator, 2 times 4, 2 times 2 is 4, pi times 2 is 2 pi. Now what are we going to get? We're going to get 3 pi plus 2 pi is 5 pi over 4. This is going to be our x3 value. We're going to put it in the chart, 5 pi over 4. Do it one more time. Add the interval, pi over 2. Get the common denominator, 2 times 2 is 4. Pi times 2 is 2 pi. What is 5 pi plus 2 pi? Well, that's going to be 7 pi over 4. This is going to be x to the 4, x4 term. All right, so now we have the x2, the x3, and the x4. The 7 pi over 4 is going in, 7 pi over 4 goes into our x values, and now we have, over here, we have 5 x values. But we got them by adding the interval, x interval, to the first x value. We added them on, and now we have all of our x values. Okay? Now what we have to do is we have to get our y values. How do we get our y values? Well, the first thing we do is we look at our problem. Let's take a look at our problem again. We have a negative cosine. Okay, let's get the pattern for our negative cosine. Negative cosine would be, we'd start at the bottom. We would have a minimum, we would have an interval, we would have a maximum, interval, and then we'd get a minimum again. So we know the pattern for a cosine. So that's where we are. Now, remember, when we have a d value, our y values are dependent on two things, okay? First of all, they're dependent on d. So we know that d, our midline, is -3. We know that it's also dependent on our amplitude, which in this case is 2. So the first thing we're going to do, and it's going to get a little bit messy, but we're going to start with our midline. So let's put the midline here. -3, underneath. Notice I'm putting it all underneath. We're starting with our midline, or our intercept. -3, -3, -3. And to that midline, I am going to add the amplitude. Now, either with a minimum, I'm going to subtract it, or I'm going to add it. Okay? So, here I have a -3, and because it's a minimum, I'm going to subtract 2. So if I have -3 and I subtract 2, where am I? -5. For the intercepts, I'm just going to stay at the intercepts at -3. For the minimums, I'm going to go down to -5 for those two minimums. But for the maximum, I'm going to add 2 to -3. So where will I end up? Well, if I add 2, I'll end up at -1. So you see how we did? From the midline, we either add or subtract 2. And that's how we get our y values. Okay, so we're almost to the end of this problem. Now that we have got our table, we're going to graph our table. So that's all we have to do. So now we've got the first point. So we'll put the points on the table. If we have pi over 4, and we'll say 3 pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, 9 pi over 4. Okay, so we'll graph 9 at pi over 4, we'll have negative 5. So let's put those. We'll have negative 4, negative 5. Pi over 4 will go to negative 5. Then 3 pi over 4 intercept, negative 1, intercept, negative 5. And graph this with a smooth cosine curve. Whoops. Okay, there we go. So now we have graphed y equals negative 2 cosine x minus pi over 4 minus 3. And you see all of the facets of it. It's an amplitude of negative 2, it's cosine, it's shifted, and it's at negative 3. All right, there you go.